Welcome to our webinar, the Business Owner Survival Guide to Remote Work Beyond COVID-19. My name is Samara. I am your host. Thank you so much for joining today. We understand the challenge that some business owners may have during these unprecedented times. A big one may be remote work. It could in fact vary when it comes to technology. This is why our mission is meeting the needs of our customers in a variety of markets. We would like to give you ideas of how to push your business forward. This webinar will be recorded. We will share it with all attendees. If you have to drop off early, don't worry. Our presenter today is Court Price, Manager of IT Client Services. It's such a privilege, Court, and he works directly with clients finding everyday solutions. He recommends tools to business owners to implement. We're very excited to have you support. If you have questions along the way, save them. We will open the Q&A chat towards the end. We will answer as many questions as we can. With that being said, Court, you have the floor.
Thank you, Samira. I appreciate the introduction. How's everyone doing this morning in your respective offices? I'm in my home office, so forgive, I tried to make the background look a little nicer, so forgive my hands disappear every once in a while. That's just the name of the game these days. So my background a little bit is that I've been managing technical programs for about 15 years. I've been with Amicus for 4. I started off in a distribution company, managing their marketing department, as well as implementing their ERP CRM software. So my experience with technology and technology within a business environment goes back 15, 20 years. And that's actually what pushed me into the IT market recently. I really learned to appreciate and love how much technology had been pushing business along. It's really the primary evolutionary force these days of business in general. And so to me, to be able to get a better understanding, get put in as many positions as possible where I'm helping people understand how to integrate technology into their business better, as far as I'm concerned. So I like to talk a little bit in general about what I consider the fundamental components to bringing technology into the workplace. And what those 3 things basically boil down to are secure technology. I mean, technology has to be secure. That's the #1 thing. I mean, we're in the IT business, but you know, with the amount of hijacking going on out there, hacking, phishing, all these other kinds of ways of stealing data and using your client's information for nefarious purposes, if you will, it's really critical to focus on security. I mean, #1, I mean, you can't introduce technology unless it's meeting, you know, the data integrity component of it. Is the data safe? Is it going to be easily accessible? All these kinds of things. You have to minimize external and internal threats. And then is the technology effective? Is it really helping your user experience? Is it bringing something to the table that you didn't have before? Is it expanding your capabilities? You know, is it something new that you can do for your business? That will allow you to expand, or will it allow you to engage with your clients in a way that you had not been before? And then, of course, with that technology, are you able to create a process for it that is easy to unfold for your clients and for your company? Do your employees know how to find the guidelines that you've created? Is everything being documented? If there's an issue going forward, do you have reportability? Can you determine where the flaw was? Documentation is key to that. You really want to make sure that you have everything set up in a way that allows your employees to thrive. And then efficiency. You know, it's one thing to add new technology. It's great, but if it's costing you a fortune, or if it's not bringing you the revenue that you would expect, then you have a problem there. So a lot of technology's main goal is to reduce labor costs where possible, or at least reintroduce the labor that you have into an area that's able to benefit your company more, instead of doing things that, you know, require you know, manual efforts over and over, repetition basically. So automation's, you know, key to technology, but also bringing in tools often will allow you to be introduced to vendors and partners that can help facilitate your business's growth more than maybe you could have with just your team. And then, of course, increasing productivity. You know, how fast are your employees able to work on old technology? Are there tools that they could be using that could speed them up and help your business in general? And then, of course, scalability. You know, you start a business off at a certain size. The only expectation there is for it to grow. Obviously, no one's looking at having their business shrink. So, is the technology expandable? Can you make sure that every step you're growing, you're not having to reinvent all of your technology? Can you just add the little bits that you need without having to recreate the wheel, so to speak? So that being said, I just want to move into the agenda. We're going to focus on initially our current trends in remote work technology. That's what's happening right now. Of course, with the COVID pandemic, currently that skews things a little bit. We're having to manage areas where we didn't have to a couple months ago even. But that being said, the remote technology really is on a trajectory, or was on a trajectory before the COVID components entered into the equation. That really showed where things were moving anyway. So we're going to talk about COVID, but we're also going to talk about just the technology's trajectory in general. And then, of course, we want to be able to maximize the value for your business. That's the whole point you're here, right? We're all business people. We're all trying to figure out how these technologies can help us, what we need to look out for. And so we're going to get into that. And then baseline security. We have typically looked at security from an in-house standpoint. You might have an IT department or a consultant that you utilize, but as soon as you move everybody off site, what happens then? Is your IT company or your provider managing that process? Is it, hey, we had to do this in a hurry and we don't really know where we're at? If that's the case, we want to look at just some baseline things that you need to do to make sure that you're safe in that working environment. And then strategic security planning for the long run. So beyond COVID, what are we looking to do here? If we're sticking with remote as a workforce plan, there are things that you can do for your remote workforce long term after the fear is gone, and you're looking more towards expanding your business again or growing your business. And then after that, we'll do a Q&A. And there's a lot of topics we're going to get into here, but if I miss anything, please feel free to stay till the end. Shoot me a question. I'm happy to answer it. We'll stay until we get everyone's questions answered. And I also want to say we're going to do this product agnostic. Every company has things they like to use, but that's not really the point of us here. I don't want to try and push any particular software or technology on you. I just want to give you a range of what's out there. We want to be able to help. And of course, every situation requires different technology anyway. So getting into specifics when really we're in a general scenario here doesn't necessarily help anybody. So if you have specific questions after that are related to your company, I'm happy to hop on a call or hop on an email with you, and we'll talk about what might help you. So jumping in, current remote workforce trends. One of the things we're seeing right off the bat is that remote workers are happier. In fact, you have a 25% lower turnover rate for remote workers, and that basically just boils down to dollars and cents for a business. I mean, retraining, hiring new employees, generally it's a time-consuming, costly endeavor. And what we're seeing, as the graph showed, basically 71% of remote workers say they're happier on their job, whereas only 55% of the on-site workers say they're happy on their job. That's a pretty significant difference. But of all these numbers, what I would really highlight here, one that jumped out at me was that 41% of the reason that 41% of the people that said why they like or why they're working remote is because their company doesn't even have an office. So that's a huge trend that we're seeing, right? Brick and mortar has gone into the cloud, it's gone into web-based businesses, and even if your business is requiring some form of brick and mortar location, you still can think about what it means to cut that overhead down. So on average, we're seeing that between 2 and 20% of a business's average overhead is spent specifically on rent. So let's say you knock 50% of that, you shrink your brick and mortar footprint by half. You're looking at between 1 to 10% savings just on overhead alone. It's huge. The other thing about workers in general is that they also said that on average, they'd be willing to take 10% less starting salary if their position was remote. That's another overhead component that's huge. So if you're considering hiring new staff, thinking about how you can entice them into a remote environment, or how you can entice them to come in, letting them know that part of their day will be spent working remotely is a huge advantage. It already allows you to start thinking about negotiating salary from that standpoint, but also just, again, happier workforce, lower turnover rates. It's a huge advantage. So one of the next trends we're seeing is phishing attacks in general. Now, these are already a huge problem. They're one of the number one ways that breaches occur across any business. But 80% of reported security incidents are based on phishing. And the reason that's huge, it's not just that someone's getting into your email account and stealing your emails. I mean, it goes beyond that. If someone's reached you with a phishing attack, generally they have some form of your user credentials. They can either get into a business network that maybe you're using the same credentials for, because a lot of remote workers are not being forced to use secure passwords by their IT company. They might have gotten a little lax on that. It could mean that they're exposing their client data. It's a bit of a horror story, but one of the clients that we used to support was in the financial market, we'll say, And they had there was real estate, and the client we were supporting was working on a transaction with another agent from a different company, and that agent's email account was compromised. And essentially, the entire escrow that was supposed to be put in place to secure this home transaction was rerouted, and the fisher managed to get in to their account and send them a routing instructions for the escrow that diverted the funds, and the people basically lost their life savings on that. Now, you think initially that's terrible, right? That's obviously terrible. No one wants to lose money like that, and it ruined a significant portion of someone's dreams and goals to lose their savings for their home. But on top of that, think about what that does for the business as well. I mean, you're now known in the industry as someone whose email wasn't secure, who wants to work with a business like that who's not protecting their clients. So it's kind of a twofold thing. You really have to look out for your clients, but you also have to look out for yourself. The next thing we're seeing is ransomware attacks, and of course, the Internet of Things, IoT devices are through the roof. We're seeing that from 2018 to 2019, the IoT devices went from 7 billion connected to 26 billion devices connected. And of course, that's going to ramp up. I mean, anything from refrigerators, smart TVs, all of these things are on a home network now that are having access to the same network that your clients or your remote workforce are using to connect to the internet. So you really have to look at the home environment of anybody that's doing business with you or for you. You have to help them out as best you can, set up a secure environment. There's a number of ways we can do that. Obviously, VPN is probably the primary. You want to make sure that when someone's going to your business network from their home, that they're using a secured, encrypted, virtual private network that keeps the traffic from things like the TV and all these kinds of things off of your business network. One of the ridiculous scenarios we heard, I think it was 2018, was Amazon Alexa of all things. Was on in the background between this couple was having a conversation. Amazon recorded the whole conversation and sent it over to a friend that was without being prompted. I mean, the friend alerted it was an employee, and the employee calls it, "Hey, we think your network's been attacked. I just got a recording of you and your wife talking in your living room." So Amazon came out and said that wasn't intended. There was a series of issues that made that happen. But the reality is, if you got devices in your houses that are listening, they're not always going to behave exactly as you'd like them to. So keep that in mind. You want to, think about the IoT devices in your home. Optimally, you have those things segmented completely onto a different network. Since they're all going to be Wi-Fi by and large, the best thing you can do is recommend your employees say, hey, if you've got one Wi-Fi SSID or login that they use for the Internet of Things devices, let's use that for those, and let's have another Wi-Fi login or Ethernet login or SSID that's used for your business contacts. You don't want to merge those two. As much as possible, you want to try and avoid that. And of course, along with those, we're seeing these malware attacks that jumped from 215% from 2018 to 2019. And of course, what this graph shows is this really industry-wide. It's across every industry. Government organizations being hit 15%, manufacturing 14%. There was Atlanta, Baltimore. These are huge cities that have actually had ransomware attacks that have taken down a significant portion of their infrastructure until there was a fee paid. Now, if you don't know what ransomware is, it's basically someone using a tool to get into your computer. There's different ways of doing that, generally through phishing, but they basically lock all of your information and they hold it encrypted until you pay out a fee. Most of them will release the information once you've paid the fee, but there's always a danger that you're going to pay and not get your money back. And the fees for these things are astronomical too. I mean, the real keen way of determining how much you can afford before it breaks you and getting that amount out of you. So, and if you're looking at a home network too, some of the main things that we're looking at is as to why these home networks are being more targeted. It's because of exactly the things we've already talked about. Poor password management. Most people in their homes, they've got silly passwords to get their routers. A lot of times people don't change their router passwords at all. It's still admin and the password is password. So anybody that's got access can log in and get in there and do what they need to do. So you really want to go through and make sure your employees are taking care of those things as much as possible. And then the next thing we're seeing, all of us know, we're doing it right now. We're on video, right? Everyone's looking to video conferencing. Zoom's through the roof right now. You can see that 30 times the previous download rate for Google Hangouts. over the over the week of March 15th to the 21st because of the COVID scare. It's just everyone's having to do it. It's just the way it is. But beyond the meetings, you also have to start thinking about how people are using video outside of that, right? Marketing is now becoming a huge video-based medium. Now, even the small stuff, it used to be that a social media post, as long as you had an image, you're okay. Now people are starting to say you need to have a video with your social media posts. In an email, if you're selling something, you want to have a video in your email. Video collaboration. These are all things that people are needing to integrate into their workflows to make sure that you're staying up with the times. And of course, right into the business applications as well. So what we're seeing is global downloads of business apps have shot through the roof as well as more and more people are focusing on working at home. So just keep those trends in mind. Asynchronous communication. Now, this poor soul, we've all been in this situation. I work from home, of course, as we all do now, or most of us do now. And maybe you, like me, have a 4-year-old who likes to barge in unannounced in the middle of a meeting and either start to talk or doing a little dance or whatever it might be that they feel like entertaining you at that moment. That's just how it is at home. So what we saw even on ABC News is susceptible to it. This gentleman was giving a talk via his home office, and in comes his kid running around his desk, and soon after, his wife comes running in trying to round up the kid and take him off somewhere else. So this is just the reality we're in. So the main thing with asynchronous communication, which is basically, if you're unfamiliar with the term, it's essentially things that don't require or expect an immediate response. So email, messaging apps, these kinds of things. There's huge advantages to in-person meetings. It's not to take anything away from them. Right, face-to-face, in-person meetings tend to have that synergistic effect. They're a little more inspirational. People can bounce ideas off each other in real time. And it has an effect. It's great. But there are advantages to doing asynchronous communication as well. So for instance, a chat app. We've already talked about the ramifications of outside distractions and what that looks like if you're in a meeting. You certainly minimize that component if you're just chatting in an app. The second thing is you can take the time to respond. You don't need to have an answer right away. If you're in a meeting, oftentimes if someone points to you and says, hey, what's the answer to this? Even if you don't know, you might be intimidated a little bit or not want to come off as somebody that doesn't know the answer. So you might try to just spit something out, maybe with less information than you wish you'd had. So the asynchronous communication really allows you time to think about it, provide a nuanced answer without the pressure. And of course, all team members can be included as well. If someone misses the meeting, they miss the meeting. In a chat app, you can shoot the same question to them, and everyone's able to get to it when they can. So huge advantages in that right now that we're seeing. And then, of course, same thing, messaging, secure file sharing. These collaboration tools, what we're seeing, the growth rates on these are through the roof, and they're there to help your business out. So we talk about maximizing value and flexibility. These tools are the things that really allow your business to be flexible. They allow you to go out on a vacation in an otherwise critical, let's say a critical role for your company. You really don't want to see this person leave for a day, let alone a week. At least if they have some form of communication, they can check at night, give you an answer that you might need. Huge flexibility for people that are otherwise strapped to their desks. And of course, things like contact centers, voice over IP now has gone through the gamut. It's not just phones anymore. They're integrating chat, they're integrating email. Instead of call centers, now you have contact centers. Maybe you want to call somebody to get help from their support line. Last year, maybe now you want to do it via text. Maybe you want to do it via Messenger. So these are all the flexible tools that people are now integrating into their businesses just to make sure that if they're really moving with the times, capturing the clients they need to capture. And then, of course, ERP, CRM software. These things are ubiquitous with any business these days, especially ERP. I was fortunate to be involved in the ground floor of implementing these about almost 20 years ago for a company that was using an old school software called DAC Easy. It was really clunky. It did not have the flexibility. We finally implemented a cloud-based ERP software, and it was just amazing what ended up happening. I mean, your business has suddenly opened up to a whole new set of tools that you never were really even considering, and the ability to maneuver through that and take advantage of those tools. The growth of the business shot through the roof at that point. And of course, the cloud component of them is really what allows that flexibility. You can work from home, you can work from your mobile phone, anywhere you need to work. You can log in the middle of the night and add a user, take a user off if somebody's being let go, whatever you need to do. That's a really important tool for your business to have access to 24/7. And then we were just talking about VoIP. These days, you think of VoIP as being kind of a great cost savings tool with added flexibility and functionality for an office. But when you think about it from a remote standpoint, suddenly all these people that are away from their desks and away from their phones are now able to take a phone call on their cell phone at home. If you have your extensions routed to cell phones, people can call in the business still and actually get a live body. They're not getting an answering machine. It's a huge advantage. And again, integrates with chat, integrates with email. It's just a huge, huge benefit for a lot of companies these days. So digging into the remote security component of things now, we talked about home networks, and these graphs really kind of break down what's going on. And I don't expect you to understand all of these or necessarily need to give much time to them, but the logistics of setting up a business network are much, much, much more difficult than a home network. And it's because of the security component. You've got traffic coming into the internet, you've got it hitting a firewall, and that firewall dictates where any of that traffic goes. You don't necessarily want your employees to access the web server. You don't necessarily want them to access the proxy server. You want everything to be managed by your IT department. So you have segmentation. You've got sections of the internet that are basically, or of the network that are not open to certain people. You might want the CEO of your company on a completely different network so that no one on the factory floor or in the office has access to that CEO's files, to his email, to his printer. Printers can be hacked these days. You pull a hard drive out of a printer, it's got a record of everything that's ever been printed on there. But you get into a home network, and it's a different game. You've got everything on the same router generally. You've got your DVR, you've got your smart TV, you've got your refrigerator. If you're one of these folks that likes to take snapshots of your food when you're at the grocery store, it's a huge movement right now, integrating IoT into your kitchen. These are all in the same network. So if you compromise one device on your IoT, now you're compromising your business network because that's how you're connecting to your business most of the time as well. So if you're also looking at speeds in home networks, we see a lot more dropouts. We see things like your internet, having issues where in a workplace, that's just not really how it goes these days. You expect your internet to work. At home, we accept the occasional dropout. So things that can be impacting that, if you've got IoT devices streaming data all the time, you're going to see slowdowns in your network. Too many streaming devices. If your kids are streaming Pandora or Spotify, or they're watching YouTube videos, these are all going to impact your network. If you're trying to upload, download, stream a video, you need to think about these kinds of things beforehand. Make sure that the network's cleared up by your family to allow you to do business as needed. And then just that segmentation. We talked about it earlier as well. Make sure you've got your Internet of Things devices separated out as much as possible. You really don't want those on the same network as your business. So this is a little bit of a long-winded one, but this is really the meat of it. The employee education is critical to your business. You can do everything in the world to lock down your business, and as soon as your employees venture out into the world without the knowledge that they need to ensure that they're interacting appropriately with this technology, your efforts are dashed. I mean, there's just no way really around that. Especially if you're looking at employees using personal devices. Generally in any office environment, if you've got a computer, your internet department, or I'm sorry, your IT department has locked that thing down. They've got the software on it, and they need to make sure that it's safe. It's critical, right? And so as soon as your employee goes home and hops on their own device, who knows what state that's in? Who knows if they've updated the Windows updates on it to patch their updates to make sure that that they're secured still. As a statistic shows, 60% of breaches are basically based on vulnerabilities that could have been patched but weren't. That's a huge number, and that's just a lack of knowledge from people that don't typically need to think about those things, and rightly so. We're not IT people if you're in a standard business. I mean, that's our job. That's not most folks' job. They're working on making money for their business, and they depend on their IT guys to handle that stuff. That's just the way it's always been. But now we have to think beyond that. We have to let our employees know, hey, you're in charge of your home network now. We can give you the best practices, but you have to follow them. And then VPN, we've talked about that a few times, but it's really important. And it's also, there's a difference here. Now, a lot of times people will have VPNs on their home networks that are there just to kind of, we've heard maybe people in China, for instance, that are trying to access the internet outside of China, and they have to use a VPN to get outside of the country's blockade of the internet. And the only way they can do that is by tunneling out of China's network into the US or Europe using the virtual private network. And all that really is basically an encrypted tunnel that allows you to send traffic in and out of a network without the network being able to see what's going on. So And that's really critical for business. If you're logging into a business network, if you're accessing a computer at your work from your home computer, you need to use a virtual private network. It's critical for that. Multi-factor authentication. This is one of the hugest things that you can do for yourself. It's especially when you look at phishing, people breaching emails. If you just had your multi-factor authentication, which is basically just that little thing where when you log into your email, it pings your phone and it says, "Hey, is this you? Yes, it's me. Okay, you have access to your email." It's absolutely critical. There's no reason not to have it. People talk about how much of a pain it is. Oh, I don't want to spend the extra 5 seconds to look at my phone. Well, that's fine and dandy until you get breached. And then that 5 seconds that you spent looking at your phone turns into, days, weeks trying to recover from what happened. Some people never recover. I mean, some breaches are so bad that businesses fold. More so in smaller businesses that don't have the protections in place. But, it's a huge problem these days. And then, of course, password management. If your password is password or your name 123, it's just not a password that's valid anymore. I mean, those kinds of things are going to get hacked so fast, it's crazy. People aren't sitting there in front of a computer guessing their password. They're using automated tools that can blast through a bunch of different passwords until they find the right one, and or through these little phishing scams, they get your password and they use it to get in. You have multi-factor authentication. As we said, that'll stop that. But also having a password manager is really helpful. A password manager is basically just a place to keep all of your passwords so you don't have to remember them. It allows you to use more complicated passwords, things that people aren't accustomed to wanting to use. A lot of times people think passwords is something you have to remember. If you're trying to remember 100 different passwords these days, good luck. It means that you're probably using bad passwords. If you can remember all of them, or using the same password, which is just as bad. You really need to think about how to up your game as far as the complexity of your passwords. If it requires a password manager to do that, so be it. Infrastructure lifecycle. You also want to consider where your infrastructure is at in its health, basically. Equipment's not meant to last forever. Hardware's not meant to last forever. Software's not meant to last forever. Windows 7, for many of you already know that, maybe some of you don't, but Windows 7 is no longer functional. Microsoft stopped supporting it. I mean, it's functional, but it's not protecting it anymore. They're not rolling out patches. It's not secured. So anybody using Windows 7 needs to update to Windows 10 as soon as they're able. It's critical for your security. And then finally, enforcement is everything. If you've got all these policies in place, but you haven't gone through the trouble to enforce them or have some kind of insight reportability, whatever you need to make sure these things are being followed, you're at ground zero again. I mean, these are really just kind of critical things that you need to do as far as the enforcement is concerned. And that can be anything. It can be, in your email, Office 365, if you're using that, you have ways of determining whether people have their multi-factor authentication turned on. G Suite, same thing. You can oversee all those components of your employees' email use. And anything else you need to have oversight with. You either need to work with your IT company, or if you're tech savvy, you need to go through that, but you need to make sure you have oversight. PC backup. This is a question that is going away a little bit as more and more people are moving to the cloud, but it's still a huge component. It used to be, you had to remind people to back up. You got to back up. You got to back up. My terrible story is I have a friend that shot their entire wedding. I'm sorry, they had their entire wedding shoot on a hard drive, and they never backed it up. The hard drive crashed. They lost every wedding video and picture they had. It's awful. It's awful. So that's from a personal standpoint, but from a business standpoint, obviously these things become even more essential. Please don't back up to a flash drive. They're prone to failure. The transfer rates are terrible. They're so bad that if you're transferring large amounts of data, there's chances are you're going to get fed up and you're just not going to do it as often as you should. So bare minimum, use an external hard drive. This is, again, bare minimum. We always recommend multiple backups. If you're using an external hard drive, back it up twice, back it up with a RAID external hard drive, whatever you can. But realistically, you should be looking into something that's cloud-based. They have software that you can just plug onto your PC. It'll automatically back up your data at night. Make sure that if your computer crashes, if you have data loss, you can get that data right back into place without missing a beat. It's just really critical. And then it's just, thinking about backup, we are going to move into strategic security planning, because even backup from a business standpoint is not generally considered to be enough. If you've got terabytes of data that you're backing up, and it gets encrypted, like as far as a ransomware, if someone locks it down, you might have a backup of that somewhere, but how long is it going to take you to get that backup and put it back into play? It can be days. Terabytes of data downloading from a cloud, that's a long, long process. And there are tools in place that are there to basically facilitate when you're backing up to the cloud. That cloud backup is also being put into a server scenario where if your data goes down, you can just remote into that cloud server and boom, you've got access to your data again in a minute. These are things that save so much money for a business long term. It's just crazy that if your business, it requires 24/7 operation. If you're the kind of business like retail, if you're going to go down for a day and you're going to lose just money hand over fist, you really need to think about doing business continuity and disaster recovery. Um, that also includes things like your internet failover. So if you're the kind of business like a hospital, for instance, what happens if your internet goes down? Hospital has to have multiple circuits, right? You can't have a hospital that just doesn't have the internet. All of a sudden, the patient's files are gone. It's a disaster. So places like that are already incorporating. Let's say you've got Cox Internet or Spectrum Internet or AT&T. A place like that's probably going to have both. It doesn't do you a whole lot of good to have two internet circuits from Cox. If Cox is down, Cox is down. So you want to have one from a secondary source. For smaller businesses and even some large, a lot of the equipment that we roll out and that other companies are rolling out will have a 4G failover. So let's say your internet goes down, even if it's for an hour, it immediately rolls over to a 4G backup. It's not as fast, it's not perfect, but it'll allow you to keep working. And the reason that's so critical these days, especially with VoIP, VoIP is great, but one of the downsides is that it used to be if your internet went down, you could at least take phone calls. People could let you know, hey, I tried to get onto your website if you're hosting your own website, or I tried to communicate with you and I'm not getting responses, what's going on? At least they could call, get a hold of somebody, you could explain the situation. These days with VoIP being on the same network, chances are they can't call you either. That's a big problem. So having a 4G failover or an internet circuit failover allows you to make sure that you're still able to communicate with people. And that's a huge deal when it comes to PR. So companies that are massive in scale, Coca-Cola's and the McDonald's of the world, there's never going to be a time where they're going to allow some kind of failover like that without having a huge PR problem on their hands if they don't have something backed up or that allows them to communicate with their clients and the public, their employees. The employees need to know what's going on. If you're working with a remote team or you're working with people in multiple offices across a wide geographic area, and the internet goes down and you can't communicate with your employees, they're not going to have any idea what's going on. So you just need to make sure all these things are in place, and you'll be better off for it. Again, longer term, hopefully once we get out of this current climate they're in right now with the COVID, these are things you can start considering as the health of your business starts growing again. One of the other things we look at is where antivirus was, a few years ago. We're now looking at PC threat monitoring as kind of a new version of that. Antivirus is a bare minimum. You need to make sure that if an executable file that's malware or viruses, where we call them, are on your computer, that they're being blocked or stopped. That's critical, of course. But beyond that, what else is happening? Antivirus isn't necessarily going to capture whether someone's on your computer or not, or on your network. It can't see that. It's really looking for files that are being triggered or certain algorithms that are being triggered that are not necessarily indicative of an intrusion per se. So threat monitoring really gets a little bit further than that. You're expecting software or even a live a security center, a SOC center, to be looking at your traffic and being able to determine what's happening. So for workstations, that might be event log monitoring. It might be breach detection. It can be determining whether someone's on your router, looking at traffic. Maybe they've got a little piece of software that's just gathering data off of your router. And then, of course, as people are moving into the cloud, you also, same thing. How are you determining who's on your cloud application? So threat monitoring really takes that antivirus situation and steps it up a notch. And then finally, what we look at as a kind of a modern solution, since everything is going cloud-based now and so much business is done over the internet, is DNS protection. Now, DNS, domain name system, is basically the thing that takes your web address and translates it from numbers into words. So if your business is theshakeshack.com, the actual web address is probably 102.53.xxx, and no one's ever going to remember those. So we need some way of translating numbers into names that we use commonly. So that's DNS, but what this DNS protection does is it makes sure that when you think you're going to theshakeshack.com, that you're really arriving there, because one of the ways that people can hack into your system is to basically redirect your traffic to other locations. So maybe they've got a fake site set up to look like the Shake Shack, and you go there thinking everything's fine and dandy, put your credit card information in, and boom, they've got you. Well, DNS protection just makes sure that when you think you're going to the Shake Shack, you're going to the Shake Shack. And that's something you can roll out. It's fairly cost effective, and you can roll it out to all your employees. It basically it's just an application they can put on their computers, and there's someone just checking the data to make sure it's all good. And I hope that really clarifies some things. I'm sure I missed a couple. If you have any questions, please take some time and throw me whatever you got. I'm happy to answer those questions. I see a question here.
Yep, I see a few questions. I'll give it another second.
Okay.
There is a chat option towards the bottom of your screen.
Okay, I'm seeing it here. Okay, I have one here that says, "Is it safe to use Starbucks public Wi-Fi?" No, no, it's okay. It's okay if you're just doing typical web traffic. It's not safe. It's not optimal, um, per se. I would try not to do any kind of transactions on there that are mission critical. Ideally, you're using your 4G. If you've got a hotspot, that's the way to go. Some people are using their computers in Starbucks and they're not realizing that there's the capability of being breached or hacked, whatnot, or just having their data. So yeah, no, you don't want to do business per se from a public Wi-Fi spot. That's always a no-no if you can. If you're just there surfing the web, shopping, like online shopping, something like that to kill some time, still not optimal, but it's a much more safe than doing business transactions through that process. Again, if you've got a hotspot, that's really the way to go. Provide your own internet wherever you are. If you're a business person and you're paying for a cell phone, just pay a few extra bucks, get a hotspot, and you're good to go. Good question. Anything else?
I see another one there. What type of antivirus would you suggest for business owners or remote workers?
That's a good question. So there is a difference between antivirus when it comes to the typical consumer grade things that you're used to, like Symantec, McAfee, versus an enterprise grade antivirus. Like a WebRoot or Cylance, these kinds of things. Realistically, if you're in a business environment, you really want to try and use an enterprise grade antivirus software. Generally, the feature set is designed to make sure that your IT department knows what's going on while it's happening, so that you're not being infected and not even aware of it, or you're infected by something your antivirus software catches it, but you don't know what to do about it. Plus, the other ones like the Symantec or Norton it's called the actual software itself. Um, Norton antivirus. They also tend to load a lot of other software on your computer that can we refer to as bloatware, but it can kind of slow things down and cause other problems. So there is a difference between enterprise and consumer grade that you should be aware of. Yeah. Anything else we got?
We have time here for another. Let's see here. What should a business owner do to protect their email from phishing scams?
Good question. Education, education, education. Spend some time with your employees. Make absolutely sure that they are understanding what an attachment looks like that they should and should not open. That's absolutely critical. There's also great tools out there for monitoring spam, things like Proofpoint, and everyone's got kind of different versions of that out there right now. But there are some that are there to basically block out known bad traffic. So you should be working with your IT company or your IT person to make sure they've got something integrated in there to protect your email as much as possible. But really, education. Never click a link that you don't recognize. If PayPal asks you to log in to check something out, go to the PayPal website and log in. Don't log in from your email. Don't launch attachments that you don't recognize. Never sign into a cloud account from an email. These should all be done from the websites themselves directly. Good question. Very good question.
That was a great question. Yes, all of them were great. I think we're good, Court.
Okay, that's what we got today. All right. Well, I just want to say, thank you very much. Thank you, Samira, for hosting this. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody out there, and I'm hoping that we were able to provide some information that's useful to all of you.
And thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Court. Thank you for all this information.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I hope all of you are safe and healthy out there, and let's get everyone back working and feeling good again. All right, you take care, folks.
This concludes our webinar. Thank you so much for joining.